Hi friends, it's Kristen with Hooks, Books, and Wanderlust, and I'm here with a new tutorial to show you how to make a fun stitch called the even moss stitch. I recently had a request for a tutorial on this stitch and happened to be working on a project using it at the same time, so it felt like fate and perfect timing, so here we are. The even moss stitch is an easy alternating stitch pattern perfect for beginners looking to up their stitch game. It boasts tons of texture using an alternating slip stitch and half double crochet combo that can be worked in rows or rounds, and today I'm going to show you how to do both. So grab your yarn and hook and let's do it. When working in rows, you're going to need a stitch multiple of 2 plus 1 or an odd number of stitches. You will start each row with a slip stitch and alternate that with a half double crochet all the way across your row, ending with a slip stitch in the final stitch of your row. You're not going to have any fancy loop work here. You're going to work your hook under the top V of each stitch across. And when you leave that third loop of your half double crochets left unworked, that's what gives you that really fun bumpy texture for this stitch. So let's see how to work this stitch in turned rows. All right, when you are working the even moss stitch in turned rows, I mentioned that you need a stitch multiple of 2 plus 1. But if you are starting with a foundation chain, then you need to add one more for the turning chain. So I'm going to work an even number of chain stitches here just to make my little swatch. Let me count how many I've got. Let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12. I'm just going to do a few more to make it a little bit wider. Okay, so now I have my even number of chains. I am going to start with a slip stitch into the second chain from my hook. That first chain is our turning chain, so you're not doing anything with that. Just a simple slip stitch, okay? And then you're going to yarn over and half double crochet into the next chain. You might notice I'm working into the back bump. I like to do that on my foundation chains because it gives me this nicer finished edge on the bottom. You do whatever you are comfortable with. And you're going to just keep alternating that slip stitch with a half double crochet across each 2 stitches all the way across. And when you come, whoops, split my yarn there. When you come to the end of the row, you should have 1 stitch left remaining or 1 chain left unworked, and you will slip stitch into that one. All right, coming up on my last pair, half double, and as you can see, I've got 1 chain remaining. I'm just going to slip stitch into that one. And so here's what it looks like right now. This is the front of that row, the front of those stitches. And I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. And you can see this pretty little ridge that's starting to develop here. Now, you don't have to alternate or start with a different stitch. You're going to start just the same as you did the previous row. So you've got your chain 1, you're going to slip stitch into the first stitch and then half double into the half double. So you're going to be putting a slip stitch into every slip stitch and a half double into every half double. You're working under the top V of those half double crochet stitches. You're not working into the third loop or anything crazy. So just very basic stitching here. And that is how you build your rows for your even moss stitch. When working in rounds, you're going to use a stitch multiple of 2 this time, not 2 plus 1 like we did in turned rows. We're going to use a stitch multiple of 2 or an even number of stitches. But you're also going to be working in turned rounds. And what that means is once you have joined the round that you're working on and closed it up, normally you would chain 1 and go directly into the next round. But in this case, you're going to chain 1, turn your work so that the back side of it is facing you, and then go in the opposite direction. So what this is going to do is give you the exact same look and texture. It's going to line up exactly the same as it does when you're working flat. If you don't do a turned round, then all of that bumpy texture is going to be on the inside of your work. So keep that in mind if you do choose to do that. But what you will notice is because you aren't turning your joins, you're actually going to end up with a slight offset as well. So it really does look best to use a turned round. So let's jump into that. All right, I'm ready to work this stitch in the round. I'm starting with a base of single crochet. It's actually foundation single crochet. If you don't know how to do that stitch, I will link that for you here in the description box below, and I'll put a little thing in the corner here too. But I've got an even number of stitches. I've got 20 single crochets here that are in my first round. I have chained one here and I'm ready to start my first round of even moss stitch. So here I am going to work the slip stitch just like I did before. It doesn't really matter which order you start in. You can start with a slip stitch or you can start with a half double crochet. Since this is an even number of stitches, it's not going to make any difference. I'm just starting with the slip stitch since that's what I did on the last one. I'm trying to be consistent here for you guys, make it as simple as possible. So we've got a slip stitch, yarn over, half double crochet into the next. And just like before, you're going to keep alternating slip stitch with half double all the way around. Okay, so I've come back around towards the end of my first round here. I've got one stitch left, and because I started with a slip stitch, my last stitch should be a half double. So I worked that, and now we're going to join to the slip stitch at the beginning of the row. So just in case you're trying to see what that looks like, here's my chain one, my turning chain, even though we haven't turned anything yet. So that's your starting chain. And then here's the slip stitch here. So I'm just going to slip stitch to join to the top of that stitch. So now I'm going to chain one and I'm going to turn my work just like if I was working in a flat turned row. Now, it's best to try and like know exactly where your stitches are. So need to visually mark that before you turn it, especially when you have to start with a slip stitch row, or I'm sorry, a slip stitch round, because they get a little tricky to see. So in this instance, I'm actually, because I ended row one, or gosh, I keep saying row, I'm sorry. Because I ended round one with a half double crochet, round two is going to start with a half double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, half double crochet into that stitch. Again, I'm only working into the top V. I'm not working into that third loop that we get there. And the next stitch is a slip stitch, so slip stitch into that. And just continue as you have been all the way around. And I'll meet you back at the end. Okay, so I have reached the last stitch of round two here. I started with a half double, so that means I need to end with a slip stitch. And this is what I'm talking about, how the slip stitches can be very tricky to find when you need to work into them and join into them at the beginning and ending of each round. So here's my slip stitch that I started round one with. I'm going to slip stitch into that. And then I'm going to slip stitch to the top of my half double crochet from the beginning of the round to join it. Chain one and turn. So now I'm back with the outside of my work facing me. I've got my first little bumpy bump. It's starting to build now that you can see that. And because my last stitch of the previous round was a slip stitch, I'm going to start this next round with a slip stitch. So basically, just always keep in mind that you're always going to work a slip stitch into a slip stitch and a half double crochet into a half double crochet. As long as you keep that straight, you'll be able to figure it out. The tricky part is always in the when you have the beginning and ending of your rounds with the slip stitches and making sure that you are working them and not skipping them and all that fun stuff. So that's it for the even moss stitch. Isn't that texture amazing? It's perfect for so many projects like washcloths, scarves. I've got a pillow and a poncho here that you can see in this slide. So many possibilities. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and that you found it helpful. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up for me. Also, I'll link my written photo tutorial for you in the description box below, just in case you might need that. Other than that, thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Happy making!